Take the ugly one to the Sheikh, her stepmother sneered, pushing her forward. Let's see if he's desperate enough. But when Layla lifted her veil, Sheikh Rashid froze, not in disgust, but in wonder. Like, comment and subscribe so we can keep sharing stories like this. The Al Mansour estate stood like a monument to wealth and power in the heart of the city, its marble columns reaching toward the sky as if trying to escape the earth itself. Inside the grand dining hall, where crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across imported marble floors, a family dinner was taking place that would change everything. Layla Al Mansour sat at the far end of the table, exactly where she had been positioned for the past several years, as far from the family as possible, while still technically being present. She was silent, as always, her eyes fixed on the untouched plate before her. At 23 years old, she had learned that invisibility was the only defense against the cruelty that came when she was noticed. More wine, darling? Victoria Al Mansour's voice dripped with the kind of sweetness that preceded venom. She was Layla's stepmother, a woman who had married into the Al Mansour fortune after Layla's mother had passed away. Victoria had transformed from a charming widow into a calculating matriarch the moment the wedding vows were complete. Yes, mother, Sabrina responded, extending her glass with the casual entitlement of someone who had never been denied anything. Sabrina was Victoria's daughter from her first marriage, and she had inherited her mother's beauty and cruelty in equal measure. She was everything Victoria had ever wanted in a daughter: confident, striking, and utterly devoid of empathy. Layla's father, Hassan Al Mansour, sat at the head of the table, absorbed in business documents even during dinner. He had been a different man when Layla's mother was alive, or so the few household staff who remembered those days had told her. Now he was simply absent, even when physically present. Hassan, darling, we received the most interesting correspondence today, Victoria announced, her voice carefully calibrated to sound casual while carrying undertones of calculated excitement. Hassan barely looked up from his papers. Sheikh Rashid al-Zahiri has sent a formal proposal. That got his attention. Hassan's head snapped up, his business documents suddenly forgotten. Sheikh Rashid al-Zahiri was not just wealthy, he was royalty, a man whose family's influence extended across multiple countries, whose business empire made the Al Mansour fortune look modest by comparison. A proposal? Hassan repeated, his voice betraying his interest despite his attempt at composure. For marriage, Victoria continued, savoring the moment like a fine dessert. He's looking for a bride. Apparently, his family has been pressuring him to settle down, and he's decided to honor tradition by seeking a wife from a respectable family. Sabrina's eyes lit up with the kind of hunger that came from years of being told she deserved everything the world had to offer. He wants to meet me. Well, Victoria paused dramatically. The proposal is actually quite open. He's requested to meet the daughters of the Al Mansour family, plural. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken implications. Layla felt every eye in the room suddenly turn toward her, and for the first time in months, she was no longer invisible. But the attention was not kind. Sabrina laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Surely you don't mean Layla. Mother, that would be ridiculous. Of course it would be, Victoria agreed smoothly. But technically she is an Al Mansour daughter. The proposal didn't specify which daughter. Hassan shifted uncomfortably. For all his emotional distance, there were still moments when glimpses of the father he had once been would surface. This was almost one of those moments. Victoria, the Sheikh obviously means Sabrina. There's no need to complicate. Oh, I completely agree, Victoria interrupted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But it gave me the most delightful idea. Layla felt her stomach drop. She had learned to recognize that particular tone in Victoria's voice. It meant that her stepmother had found a new way to exercise the casual cruelty that seemed to bring her so much satisfaction. You see, Victoria continued, leaning forward conspiratorially, I've heard that Sheikh Rashid is known for his, let's call it, traditional values. He supposedly cares more about character and virtue than appearance. Some even say he's searching for a wife with inner beauty. Sabrina snorted. That's what people say when they're trying to be polite about settling for less. Exactly, darling. Victoria's smile widened, which is why I think it would be absolutely fascinating to test this theory. Let's send both daughters to meet him. Let him choose between obvious beauty, She gestured toward Sabrina, and whatever it is that Layla has to offer. The cruelty of the suggestion hung in the air like poison gas. Layla felt her face burning with humiliation, but she kept her eyes fixed on her plate, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. "That's brilliant, Mother!" Sabrina clapped her hands together. "Can you imagine his face when he realizes one of his options is her? It'll be the joke of the season." "It's settled then," Victoria declared, as if the matter had been open for discussion. "We'll accept the Sheikh's invitation and send both girls. After all, we wouldn't want to appear as if we're hiding anything, would we?" Hassan opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. Layla watched her father choose his own comfort over her dignity, just as he had done countless times before. The disappointment was so familiar it barely registered anymore. "Layla," Victoria's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. "Don't you have anything to say? You're being given an opportunity that someone like you should never have dreamed of." Layla finally lifted her eyes to meet her stepmother's gaze. There was challenge there, an invitation to react, to provide entertainment through her humiliation. But Layla had learned long ago that the only power she had was in controlling her own response. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. Victoria's smile faltered slightly, disappointed by the lack of dramatic reaction. "Well, how obedient. I suppose that's something at least." "When is the meeting?" Hassan asked, already returning his attention to his documents. The brief flicker of paternal concern extinguished as quickly as it had appeared. "In a few days. The Sheikh has invited us to his palace for a formal introduction. It's quite an honor, really. His family rarely opens their private residence to outsiders." "A palace," Sabrina breathed, her eyes distant with fantasies of wealth and status. "Mother, what should I wear? It has to be perfect. I need to make an impression that he'll never forget." "Don't worry, darling. We'll make sure you look absolutely stunning. After all, we want there to be no question about which daughter is the obvious choice." The dinner continued, but Layla barely heard the conversation that flowed around her. Her mind was racing, trying to understand why Victoria would go to such lengths for what seemed like nothing more than an elaborate joke. But then, cruelty had never needed logical motivation in this household. It simply was, as constant and inevitable as the sunrise. Later that night, Layla stood at the window of her room, the smallest bedroom in the vast estate, tucked away in a wing that guests never saw. She looked out over the manicured gardens, the fountains that ran day and night, the statues imported from countries she had never visited and probably never would. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass, and she studied it with the detachment of someone who had been told repeatedly that what she saw was insufficient. Her features were different from Sabrina's, that was true. Where her half-sister had sharp, dramatic beauty that commanded attention, Layla's features were softer, gentler. Her eyes were large and expressive, framed by lashes that seemed too long for practicality. Her face was heart-shaped, with high cheekbones that caught the light in ways that might have been called striking if anyone had bothered to look closely enough to notice. But she had learned early that beauty was not objective. It was defined by those who had the power to make their definitions matter. And in this household, Victoria had decided long ago what beauty was and what it was not. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Before she could respond, the door opened to reveal Nadia, one of the household staff who had worked for the Al-Mansour family since before Layla was born. She was one of the few people in the house who remembered Layla's mother, who sometimes looked at Layla with something that might have been sympathy. "I brought you some tea," Nadia said softly, setting down a tray. "I thought you might need it after that dinner." "Thank you," Layla responded, grateful for the small kindness. Nadia hesitated at the door, as if debating whether to speak. Finally, she said, "Your mother would be proud of how you handled yourself tonight. You have her grace." The words were meant to comfort, but they only emphasized the absence that had defined Layla's life for so many years. Her mother had died when Layla was young, too young to have more than fractured memories of warmth and safety. Everything after had been cold. "Nadia," Layla said suddenly, "do you know anything about Sheikh Rashid? About what kind of man he is?" Nadia's expression became thoughtful. "I've heard stories. They say he's fair, that he treats his staff with respect. They say he's intelligent, educated in the best universities but not arrogant about it. And they say—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "They say he's looking for something real in a world where everything is performance." "Then, Victoria is sending me as a joke to the wrong man," Layla said with a bitter smile. "Someone looking for authenticity won't be fooled by whatever game she's playing." "Maybe," Nadia agreed. "Or maybe this is exactly where you need to be." Sometimes the universe has plans that the people making them don't understand. After Nadia left, Layla lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind unable to rest. In a few days, she would be paraded in front of a powerful man as the punchline to a cruel joke. She would stand next to her half-sister and be found wanting by design. It was humiliation scheduled and anticipated. But beneath the dread, something else was stirring. It was small and fragile, like the first green shoot pushing through frozen ground. It was the tiniest whisper of a question. What if? What if Sheikh Rashid really was different? What if he saw what her family was blind to? What if, for once in her life, someone looked at her and saw value instead of deficiency? It was a dangerous hope, the kind that could shatter into pieces that cut deep. But as Layla closed her eyes, she allowed herself to hold it, just for a moment, before the morning came and reality would reassert itself once again. The universe was about to answer questions she hadn't even known she was asking. The days leading up to the meeting with Sheikh Rashid passed in a blur of activity that somehow managed to both include and exclude Layla simultaneously. The estate had transformed into something resembling a military operation, with Victoria as the commanding general orchestrating every detail of what she called Sabrina's debut. Designers arrived with racks of exquisite fabrics, jewelry specialists brought cases of precious stones, and beauty consultants came with arsenals of cosmetics and treatments. All of it flowed into Sabrina's suite of rooms, which had been converted into something resembling a luxury boutique. Layla watched this parade of preparation from a distance, a ghost in her own home. "Layla," Victoria's voice called out on the morning before the scheduled meeting. "Come here. We need to address your situation." Layla found her stepmother in Sabrina's room, surrounded by the detritus of excessive preparation. Sabrina sat at her vanity like a queen receiving tribute, examining herself in the mirror with the satisfaction of someone who had never questioned their own worth. "We can't have you going to the palace looking like you just wandered in from the street," Victoria said, her tone suggesting this was an act of great generosity rather than basic decency. "It would reflect poorly on the family." "How considerate of you, Mother," Sabrina added, not bothering to hide her smirk. "We wouldn't want the Sheikh to think we're completely heartless, would we?" Victoria gestured to a simple outfit laid out on a chair. "This should be appropriate. Nothing too elaborate, of course. We wouldn't want to give the wrong impression about your place in all this." The outfit was conservative and plain, clearly chosen to ensure Layla would fade into the background. It was the sartorial equivalent of a whisper in a room full of shouting. Layla took it without comment, understanding perfectly what was expected of her. "And Layla," Victoria added as she turned to leave, "try to remember that you're there as a courtesy. The Sheikh is a busy man. Don't waste his time with any awkward attempts at conversation. Just smile, nod, and let your sister do the talking." "Yes, Victoria," Layla responded, using her stepmother's first name as she had been instructed years ago. Victoria had decided early on that she didn't want to be called mother by her stepdaughter, claiming it would be confusing. That evening, Nadia came to Layla's room to help her prepare. The older woman worked in silence for a while, her hands gentle as she arranged Layla's long hair with a care that stood in stark contrast to the dismissive treatment she received from her family. "You know," Nadia said softly as she worked, "your mother used to say that true beauty reveals itself in unexpected moments. She believed that the universe has a way of showing truth to those who are willing to see it." "That's a nice thought," Layla replied, trying to keep the skepticism from her voice. "But I'm not sure the universe is paying attention to what happens in the Al-Mansour household." "Perhaps," Nadia agreed, "or perhaps it's been paying closer attention than you think." When Nadia finished, Layla looked at herself in the mirror. Even with the plain outfit Victoria had chosen, even without the elaborate styling that Sabrina had received, there was something in her reflection that she hadn't noticed before. It wasn't dramatic or commanding, but it was there, a quiet dignity. a gentle strength that no amount of cruel treatment had managed to completely extinguish. The morning of the meeting arrived with a tension that permeated the entire household. Layla had barely slept, her mind racing with scenarios ranging from humiliating to catastrophic. She told herself it didn't matter, that this was just another performance in the ongoing theater of her family's cruelty. But the anxiety in her chest suggested otherwise. The drive to Sheikh Rashid's palace took them beyond the familiar boundaries of the city, into an area where wealth was measured not in millions, but in legacy and influence. The palace itself appeared gradually, first as a distant silhouette against the sky, then as an increasingly impressive structure that seemed to grow more magnificent with each passing moment. Finally, Sabrina breathed, her eyes wide with acquisitive appreciation. This is what I deserve. This is what I've been waiting for. The vehicle passed through security gates that looked more sophisticated than those at international airports, then wound through gardens that could have been mistaken for botanical museums. Fountains danced in choreographed patterns, rare flowers bloomed in careful arrangements, and ancient trees provided shade that felt like wisdom. When they finally stopped at the main entrance, staff members appeared as if materialized from the air itself, opening doors with practiced precision and offering greetings in multiple languages. This was hospitality elevated to an art form, a level of service that made the Al Mansour household's pretensions look provincial by comparison. "Welcome to the Al-Zahiri residence," a man in formal attire greeted them. His name was Khalid, and he introduced himself as the palace's chief steward. His demeanor was professional but warm, treating each member of their party with equal courtesy, including Layla, which surprised her more than she wanted to admit. They were led through corridors that could have housed art museums, past rooms that spoke of history and culture spanning centuries. This wasn't just wealth, it was heritage, the kind of deep-rooted legacy that money alone could never buy. Finally, they arrived at a formal receiving room that managed to be both grand and intimate. The space was filled with natural light, the architecture drawing the eye upward while still maintaining human scale. It was here that they would wait for Sheikh Rashid to arrive. Victoria immediately began positioning Sabrina in the most flattering spot, adjusting her posture, reminding her of practiced smiles and rehearsed conversation topics. Hassan stood to the side, checking his watch repeatedly, his discomfort with the social aspects of this meeting evident in every gesture. Layla found a seat near the window, trying to make herself as unobtrusive as possible. From this vantage point, she could see the gardens stretching out below, and in the distance, the city they had come from looked small and almost irrelevant. "Remember, darling," Victoria whispered urgently to Sabrina, "be charming, but not eager. Interested, but not desperate. You want him to feel like he's winning something valuable, not picking up something that's been offered too freely." "I know, Mother," Sabrina responded with practiced confidence. "I've been preparing for something like this my entire life." The door opened, and Khalid reappeared. "Sheikh Rashid Al-Zahiri," he announced simply. The man who entered the room was not what Layla had expected, though she realized she hadn't consciously formed expectations. Sheikh Rashid was younger than she had imagined, with an air of quiet authority that had nothing to do with arrogance. He moved with the confidence of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, yet there was nothing intimidating about his presence. His eyes swept across the room, taking in each person with an attention that felt genuine, rather than performative. When his gaze reached Layla in her corner by the window, it paused, just for a moment, but long enough for her to notice. "Mr. Al-Mansour," Sheikh Rashid greeted Hassan, with a warmth that seemed to put her father at ease immediately. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. Please, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Rashid." The informality of the introduction seemed to surprise Victoria, who had clearly prepared for something more ceremonial. Sabrina, however, adapted quickly, stepping forward with her most practiced smile. "Sheikh Rashid, I'm Sabrina Al-Mansour. It's an honor to meet you." Her voice was perfectly modulated, hitting exactly the right notes of respect and confidence. "The pleasure is mine," Rashid responded courteously, but Layla noticed that his eyes didn't linger on Sabrina the way Victoria had clearly expected them to. "And this," Victoria said, gesturing dismissively in Layla's direction, "is my husband's daughter, from his first marriage, Layla." The introduction was deliberately designed to minimize, to establish hierarchy, to make clear who was the real candidate and who was merely fulfilling a technical requirement. Layla had prepared herself for this moment, had steeled herself to accept the humiliation with the same quiet dignity that had become her armor. But what happened next was completely unexpected. Sheikh Rashid crossed the room to where Layla sat, his movements unhurried but purposeful. When he reached her, he offered a slight bow, a gesture of respect that seemed to shock everyone in the room. Layla, most of all. "Layla al-Mansur," he said, and something in the way he spoke her name made it sound like music, rather than mere identification. "I'm very pleased to meet you. Thank you for coming." Layla stood, her heart racing with confusion and something that might have been hope. "The honor is mine, Sheikh Rashid. Please, just Rashid." He smiled, and it was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that suggested he didn't smile often, but meant it when he did. "I prefer to save formality for occasions that actually require it." He gestured toward the seating area. "Please, everyone, make yourselves comfortable. I thought we might have tea and conversation before the more formal aspects of the afternoon. I find that the best way to know people is through natural interaction rather than ceremonial performance." As everyone settled into the seating arrangement, Layla noticed that Rashid positioned himself in a way that didn't favor any particular guest. But throughout the initial pleasantries, his attention kept returning to her, not in an obvious way that would invite comment, but with a consistency that she couldn't attribute to accident. "Tell me," Rashid said, addressing the group but somehow making it feel like an individual question, "what brings you joy? What do you do when you have time that's truly your own?" It was an unexpected question, one that clearly wasn't part of Victoria's prepared script. Sabrina recovered quickly, launching into a rehearsed answer about charity work and cultural events that sounded impressive, but somehow hollow. When the question reached Layla, she felt everyone's eyes on her. Victoria's warning glare, Sabrina's amused contempt, Hassan's apathetic disinterest. They were waiting for her to embarrass herself, to confirm their assessment of her as lesser. "I read," Layla said simply, "and I spend time in the garden when I can. There's something about watching things grow that feels hopeful." It wasn't eloquent or impressive. It wasn't designed to impress or perform. It was just true, and the moment the words left her mouth, Layla regretted their simplicity. But Rashid's expression changed, something lighting up in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Hopeful," he repeated softly, as if testing the weight of the word. "That's a beautiful way to describe gardening. Most people talk about it as a hobby or a aesthetic choice. But hope, that's something else entirely." The conversation continued, flowing through topics ranging from philosophy to current events, to the role of tradition in modern society. Rashid proved to be extraordinarily well educated, but he wore his knowledge lightly, asking questions that invited discussion rather than making pronouncements that demanded agreement. Throughout it all, Layla noticed a pattern. Whenever Sabrina spoke, she performed, each word carefully chosen for maximum impact, each opinion calibrated to impress. It was masterful in its way, the result of years of training in the art of being desirable. But whenever Layla spoke, she simply answered honestly. She didn't have practiced responses or strategic opinions. She just had her thoughts, unpolished and sincere. And Rashid, she realized with growing wonder, seemed to prefer the latter. "Layla," he said during a lull in the broader conversation, "I noticed you looking at the gardens earlier. Would you like to see them more closely? I'm quite proud of what we've created here." The invitation hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria's face had gone rigid with poorly concealed fury. Sabrina looked as if she'd been slapped. Hassan seemed confused, unable to process this deviation from the expected script. "I would love that," Layla heard herself say, her voice steadier than she felt. As Rashid led her toward the garden doors, Layla could feel her family's collective shock radiating behind her like heat. She knew there would be consequences for this, that Victoria would make her pay for whatever was happening. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Layla didn't care. The universe, it seemed, had been paying attention after all. The gardens of the Al-Zahiri Palace were not simply beautiful. They were a living poem written in flowers, water, and ancient stone. As Rashid led Layla down a pathway lined with flowering trees, She felt as though she had stepped out of her life and into someone else's dream. "These gardens were started by my great-grandmother," Rashid explained as they walked, his voice carrying a warmth that had been absent during the formal reception. She believed that a palace without a garden was just a building, but a palace with a garden was a home. "She sounds like she was wise," Layla responded, her earlier nervousness beginning to ease in the peaceful surroundings. "She was," Rashid smiled, but there was something bittersweet in the expression. "She was also the only person in my family who ever asked me what I wanted rather than telling me what I should want." The vulnerability in that statement surprised Layla. Here was a man who could have anything, who wielded power and wealth that most people couldn't comprehend, and yet there was loneliness in his words that resonated with her own experience. They reached a secluded area where a fountain bubbled softly, surrounded by benches carved from ancient stone. Rashid gestured for her to sit, and for a moment, they simply existed in comfortable silence, listening to the water's gentle music. "Can I be honest with you?" Rashid asked suddenly, turning to face her directly. "Please," Layla responded, though her heart began to race with uncertainty about what might come next. "This whole process, meeting potential brides, having families parade their daughters before me like merchandise at an auction, it's exhausting, and it's false. Everyone performs, everyone pretends, everyone shows me exactly what they think I want to see." He paused, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "But you didn't perform. In that room, when everyone else was trying to impress me, you just answered honestly. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how valuable?" Layla felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the shock of being seen, truly seen, for perhaps the first time in her life. "I didn't have a performance prepared," she admitted. "I'm not supposed to be the one you're interested in. I'm just here because your stepmother thought it would be funny to humiliate you," Rashid finished quietly. "Yes, I understood that within minutes of meeting your family. The way she introduced you, the way your half-sister looked at you, the way your father couldn't even meet your eyes. I've spent my entire life reading people, Layla. It's a necessary skill when everyone wants something from you." The accuracy of his observation was both validating and painful. "Then why did you invite me to the gardens? If you know it's a joke, why participate in it?" Rashid leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Because it's not a joke to me. Whatever cruel game your family is playing, they made one critical error. They showed me exactly the person I've been searching for. Someone who knows what it means to be invisible in a room full of people. Someone who understands that wealth and status are not the same as worth. Someone who's been tested by cruelty and hasn't let it destroy their capacity for hope." "How do you know I have hope?" Layla whispered, remembering her own words from earlier. "Because you're here," Rashid said simply. "Because you could have refused to come, could have protected yourself from potential humiliation. But you came anyway. That's not just hope, that's courage." Before Layla could respond, the sound of voices approaching shattered the peaceful moment. Victoria appeared at the entrance to the garden area, her face a carefully constructed mask of concern that didn't quite hide the rage simmering beneath. "There you are." Victoria's voice was saccharine sweet, but with an edge that Layla recognized as dangerous. "Sheikh Rashid, I apologize if Layla has been monopolizing your time. I'm sure you'd like to speak with Sabrina as well. After all, that's why we're here." Rashid stood slowly, and Layla watched his entire demeanor shift. The warmth and vulnerability he had shown moments before disappeared, replaced by the cool, professional courtesy of a man who had learned to guard himself carefully. "Mrs. Al-Mansour, I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite capable of managing my own time," Rashid said, his tone polite, but carrying unmistakable authority. "I asked Layla to walk with me because I wanted to speak with her specifically." Victoria's smile became strained. Of course. But surely you want to get to know both girls. Sabrina has so much to offer. Her education, her social connections, her understanding of the responsibilities that come with your position." "I'm sure she does," Rashid agreed neutrally. "However, I've made my assessment." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Layla felt her heart stop, unsure what he meant, but terrified of the implications. "Your assessment?" Victoria repeated, her composure beginning to crack. Rashid turned to Layla, and the warmth returned to his eyes. "Layla, Would you do me the honor of joining me for dinner tomorrow evening? Just the two of us, without the performance of family politics. I'd like to continue our conversation. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Layla opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. She was aware of Victoria's shock, of Sabrina appearing behind her mother with an expression of disbelief that would have been comical in any other circumstance. Yes, Layla finally managed. I would be honored. Wonderful, Rashid smiled. I'll send a car for you tomorrow at sunset. And Layla, come as yourself. Don't let anyone tell you what to wear or how to act. I want to know the real you, not some version designed to please. The drive back to the Al Mansour estate was the longest hour of Layla's life. Victoria sat in furious silence, her jaw clenched so tightly that Layla could hear her teeth grinding. Sabrina alternated between shooting venomous glares at Layla and staring out the window in disbelief. Hassan seemed completely bewildered, unable to process this deviation from the expected outcome. The moment they arrived home, Victoria's carefully maintained composure exploded. "How dare you!" she hissed at Layla the moment they were inside. "How dare you sabotage your sister's opportunity?" "I didn't sabotage anything," Layla responded, finding a strength in her voice that surprised even herself.
"I didn't do anything except answer honestly when spoken to." "You manipulated him!" Sabrina shrieked, abandoning any pretense of grace. "You must have said something, done something, to make him think you're anything other than what you are." "And what am I, Sabrina?" Layla asked, the years of accumulated hurt suddenly finding a voice. "What exactly do you think I am?" "You're nothing," Sabrina spat back.
"You're the daughter nobody wanted, the girl nobody looks at twice, the family embarrassment we've had to tolerate. That's enough." Hassan's voice cut through the vitriol, surprising everyone. He looked exhausted, older than his years, carrying the weight of his own guilt. "Victoria, Sabrina, go upstairs, now." "Hassan, you can't seriously be defending her," Victoria protested. "She's ruined everything." "I said go upstairs," Hassan repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. When they were alone, Hassan looked at his daughter, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. "Layla, I owe you an apology. Multiple apologies, actually. For years of absence, for allowing them to treat you the way they have, for becoming someone your mother wouldn't recognize." Layla felt tears finally spilling over. "Why didn't you protect me? After Mom died, why did you let them make me invisible?" "Because it was easier," Hassan admitted, his own eyes wet. "Because grief made me weak, and Victoria made my life simpler by taking over all the decisions. But simple isn't the same as right. And I've failed you. I've failed your mother's memory. What do I do now?" Layla whispered. "Victoria will make this impossible. She won't let me go to that dinner. She'll find a way to sabotage this." Hassan straightened his shoulders, and for just a moment, Layla saw a glimpse of the father she barely remembered from her childhood. "She won't, because I'm still the head of this family, and it's time I started acting like it. You're going to that dinner, Layla. And whatever happens, I'll make sure Victoria doesn't interfere." Later that night, as Layla lay in bed trying to process the impossible events of the day, there was a soft knock at her door. It was Nadia, carrying another tray of tea and something else, a small box wrapped in faded tissue paper. "Your mother left this for you," Nadia said softly. "She made me promise to give it to you when you needed it most. I think that time is now." With trembling hands, Layla opened the box. Inside was a delicate pendant, a small garden rose carved from jade, suspended on a silver chain. There was also a note, written in her mother's handwriting. "My dearest Layla, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and my heart breaks knowing I won't see the beautiful woman you'll become. But I know this. You have a strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. You have a beauty that reveals itself to those wise enough to look beyond the surface. Never let anyone convince you that you are less than extraordinary. All my love always, Mama." Layla clutched the pendant to her chest, sobbing with a mixture of grief and gratitude. Her mother had known that life would be difficult, that she would face cruelty and doubt, but had believed in her daughter's strength anyway. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Hassan, true to his word, informed Victoria at breakfast that Layla would be attending her dinner with Sheikh Rashid, and that there would be no interference. You're making a mistake, Victoria said coldly. When this falls apart, and it will, you'll have destroyed any chance of an alliance with the al-Zahiri family. Or, Hassan countered, we might gain one. But for once, we're going to let Layla make her own choices. As the day progressed toward evening, Layla found herself in her room, staring at her limited wardrobe and feeling the weight of impossibility. How was she supposed to dress for dinner with a sheikh when everything she owned had been deliberately chosen to help her disappear? Another knock came at her door. This time it was Sabrina, and Layla braced herself for another confrontation. But her half-sister's expression was strange. Not kind exactly, but not purely hostile either. I don't understand it, Sabrina said without preamble. I've spent my entire life preparing to be exactly what men like Sheikh Rashid want. I know how to dress, how to speak, how to be perfect. And yet he chose you, the one person who shouldn't have stood a chance. I didn't try to be chosen, Layla responded quietly. I know, Sabrina said, and there was something almost like respect in her voice. That's what makes it worse. You didn't even try, and you still won. She held out a garment bag. This is from my collection. It's simple, elegant, and it will actually fit you properly. I don't know why I'm giving it to you. Maybe because watching you go to that dinner in rags would be admitting that even with every advantage, I still wasn't enough. After Sabrina left, Layla opened the bag to find an outfit that was indeed perfect. Understated but beautiful, the kind of clothing that enhanced rather than overwhelmed. As sunset approached, and Layla prepared to leave for the dinner that would change everything, she wore her mother's pendant, her borrowed outfit, and something she hadn't worn in years, genuine hope. The car that arrived for her was elegant, but not ostentatious. As it pulled away from the Al-Mansur estate, Layla looked back to see her father watching from a window, Victoria glaring from another, and Sabrina nowhere to be seen. She was driving toward the unknown, toward possibility, toward a man who had somehow seen value where her family had seen only deficiency. And for the first time in her life, Layla was driving toward something that felt like it might actually be her future. The private dining room where Rashid had arranged their dinner was nothing like the grand, formal spaces Layla had expected. Instead of intimidating opulence, she found herself in an intimate courtyard open to the evening sky, where strings of delicate lights created a canopy of artificial stars. A single table had been set with simple elegance, and the sound of a nearby fountain provided gentle background music. Rashid was waiting for her, and when he saw her, his expression shifted into something that made Layla's breath catch, pure, unguarded appreciation. You look beautiful, he said simply, then added with a slight smile, though I suspect you'd look beautiful in anything. Or perhaps more accurately, your beauty has nothing to do with what you're wearing. Layla touched her mother's pendant nervously. Thank you. And thank you for this. She gestured to the courtyard. It's not what I expected. I know. That was intentional, Rashid admitted as he held out her chair. I wanted you to be comfortable, not impressed. We're just two people having dinner and conversation. Everything else, the palace, the title, the expectations, we leave those outside this courtyard for tonight. As they settled into their seats, staff members appeared with the first course, then disappeared with the practiced discretion of people who understood when their presence was not desired. Layla realized that Rashid had orchestrated this to give them complete privacy. Can I start by asking you something that might seem strange? Rashid began once they were alone. Of course. What do you dream about? Not career aspirations or practical goals, but actual dreams. What fills your mind when you let yourself imagine without limitations? The question caught Layla off guard. No one had ever asked her about dreams. Her life had been about survival, about making herself small enough to avoid Victoria's wrath, about getting through each day. I dream about being seen, she finally answered, the honesty of the statement surprising even herself. Not in a vain way, but really seen, understood. I dream about having conversations that matter, about making a difference in someone's life, about creating something beautiful that outlasts me. I dream about a garden where nothing is perfect, but everything is loved. Rashid was quiet for a moment, but his eyes held an intensity that made Layla feel as though he was memorizing every word. That's the most honest answer anyone has ever given me. Most people tell me about wealth or status or accomplishments. You told me about meaning. What do you dream about? Layla asked, emboldened by his genuine interest. Freedom, Rashid responded without hesitation. Not from responsibility. I actually love the work I do. But freedom from performance, from the constant weight of others' expectations, from always having to be the version of myself that everyone else needs me to be. I dream about being with someone who lets me just exist. That sounds lonely, Layla said softly. It is, Rashid agreed. I'm surrounded by people every day, but most of them only see my title or my wealth or what I can do for them. They don't see me. That's why yesterday, when you spoke to me without performance, without calculation, it was like finally being able to breathe after holding my breath for years. As the evening progressed through multiple courses, their conversation flowed with an ease that felt miraculous. They talked about books and philosophy, about what makes a life meaningful, about the difference between happiness and contentment. Rashid revealed that he had studied at universities across 3 continents, but found his most valuable education came from listening to the people others ignored. Staff members, drivers, gardeners who saw the world from perspectives that wealth couldn't buy. My mother died when I was young, Rashid shared during a quiet moment. She was everything. Kind, intelligent, strong in ways that had nothing to do with power. After she died, my father remarried quickly. The woman he chose was strategic, beautiful, connected, perfect on paper, but she had no capacity for genuine emotion. Layla felt a chill of recognition. What happened? She made my life systematically miserable in ways that were too subtle for my father to see. She never hit me, never raised her voice, but she had 1,000 small cruelties that left no visible marks. She would give elaborate gifts to her own children while giving me nothing, then tell my father she'd included me, but I must have been ungrateful. She would interrupt me constantly, but praise her own children's opinions. She made me invisible in my own home. That's why you understood, Layla whispered. Yesterday, when you saw what Victoria was doing, you recognized it because you lived it. Yes, Rashid confirmed. I saw the way she introduced you, the way your half-sister looked at you, and I recognized all of it. The casual cruelty of people who have convinced themselves they're superior, the death by 1,000 cuts that no one else seems to notice. How did you survive it? Layla asked, needing to know that there was a path through the pain. Barely, Rashid admitted. I became very good at being what everyone needed me to be. The perfect son, the dedicated student, the responsible heir. But inside, I was dying. Until one day, one of our gardeners, an old man named Ibrahim, who had worked for my family for decades, found me sitting alone after another of my stepmother's calculated humiliations. Rashid paused, the memory clearly still powerful. He said something I've never forgotten. Young master, plants that grow in harsh conditions develop the deepest roots. The ones grown in perfect circumstances often fall at the first real storm. Your pain is teaching you depth. That conversation changed everything. It didn't make the cruelty hurt less, but it gave me a framework to understand it differently. Is that why you started the gardens? Layla asked, remembering what he'd told her about his great-grandmother. Yes. After my stepmother finally left, she divorced my father when she found someone wealthier. I poured everything into creating spaces where things could grow regardless of where they started. Every plant in these gardens has a story. Many of them were rescued from places where they were considered weeds or nuisances. But here, with care and attention, they thrived. Layla felt tears forming. You're trying to grow people the same way. I'm trying to create space for people to grow themselves, Rashid corrected gently. Layla, when I sent that proposal to families, I wasn't looking for the most beautiful woman or the most connected or the most accomplished. I was looking for someone who understood that worth isn't given by others. It's inherent. Someone who had been tested by cruelty and didn't let it destroy their capacity for gentleness. Why? Layla asked. Why is that important to you? Because those are the qualities that matter in building a life together. Beauty fades. Status changes. Accomplishments become yesterday's news. But character, the kind that's been forged in fire and chose kindness anyway, that's forever. They talked long into the night, the staff having cleared the meal and left them entirely alone under the stars. Rashid told her about his work modernizing outdated systems, about his dreams of creating opportunities for people who had been overlooked. Layla shared her love of reading, how books had been her escape, how she had taught herself 3 languages using library resources because learning felt like freedom. 3 languages? Rashid looked impressed. Which ones? French, Italian, and Arabic, Layla listed, then added sheepishly, I'm not fluent, but I can read them. I started with French because Victoria always spoke it with Sabrina to exclude me from conversations, so I learned it just to understand what they were saying about me. That's not just learning a language. That's an act of resistance, Rashid observed. You refuse to let them keep you ignorant of your own story. As the evening stretched toward midnight, Rashid's expression became more serious. Layla, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it knowing that I don't say things I don't mean. Layla's heart began racing, uncertain what was coming. I've met dozens of potential brides over the past year. My family has been pressuring me relentlessly to marry, to produce heirs, to fulfill dynastic obligations. Every woman I've met has been accomplished, beautiful, appropriate, and every single one of them left me feeling more alone than before. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. But sitting with you these past hours, I've felt more seen, more understood, more genuinely connected than I have in my entire adult life. And I need you to know that this isn't just interest or attraction. This is recognition, like my soul has been searching for its match and finally found it. Layla couldn't speak. The moment was too large, too precious, too terrifying in its potential. I know this is fast, Rashid continued. I know we've only just met, but I also know that some truths don't need time to become clear. They just are. And the truth is that I want to know everything about you. I want to hear your thoughts on every subject. I want to create a life where you never have to make yourself small again. I want to build something real with you. Rashid, Layla finally found her voice. I don't understand why. I'm not special. I'm not accomplished like the other women you must have met. I'm just... Stop, Rashid interrupted gently but firmly. You're doing it right now, minimizing yourself because that's what you've been taught to do. But Layla, you're extraordinary precisely because you've maintained your humanity in an environment designed to destroy it. You've kept your capacity for hope when you had every reason to become bitter. You've remained genuine when everyone around you is performing. That's not just anything. That's remarkable. Before Layla could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps interrupted the moment. Khalid, the palace steward, appeared looking apologetic but concerned. Sheikh Rashid, I apologize for the interruption, but there's an urgent matter requiring your attention. Your father has arrived unexpectedly and is requesting to see you immediately. Rashid's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, but Layla saw the shift, a return of the careful control he'd dropped during their evening together. My father is supposed to be in Europe for another week. Did he say what this is about? No, sir. But he seems displeased. Rashid stood, offering his hand to help Layla up. I'm so sorry. This is terrible timing, but my father isn't a man who can be put off when he's decided something requires his immediate attention. Of course, Layla said, trying to hide her disappointment. I understand. Let me have you brought home, Rashid said, then added with quiet intensity. But Layla, this conversation isn't over. What I said tonight, I meant every word. We'll continue this soon, I promise. As Khalid escorted Layla to a waiting car, she caught a glimpse of an older man in traditional formal attire entering the palace's main building. His bearing was rigid, his expression stern, and even from a distance, she could feel the force of his disapproval radiating outward. The drive home felt surreal. Layla's mind was spinning from the emotional whiplash of the evening, the intimacy of their conversation, Rashid's incredible declarations, and then the abrupt ending. She touched her mother's pendant, drawing strength from its presence. When she arrived home, the Al-Mansur estate was dark except for a single light in Victoria's study. As Layla quietly tried to make her way to her room, her stepmother's voice called out, Layla, come here. With a sense of dread, Layla entered the study to find Victoria sitting at her desk, a tablet in front of her displaying what appeared to be news articles and social media posts. You think you've won something, Victoria said, her voice dangerously calm. You think that one evening with the Sheikh means anything. I don't think I've won anything, Layla responded quietly. I just had dinner with someone who asked to spend time with me. Let me tell you what actually happened tonight, Victoria continued as if Layla hadn't spoken. Sheikh Rashid's father, Khalil al-Zahiri, received word that his son was pursuing an inappropriate match. He's flown back from Europe specifically to put an end to whatever foolish fantasy Rashid has developed. Layla felt cold dread spreading through her chest. How do you know this? Victoria smiled, and it was the cruelest expression Layla had ever seen on her face. Because I called him. I explained that you were unstable, manipulative, completely unsuitable for someone of his son's position. I provided documentation of behavioral problems, academic failures, evidence of emotional instability. Those are lies, Layla whispered, though she knew the truth didn't matter. Are they? Victoria leaned forward. Or are they just a different perspective on the same facts? A girl who isolates herself, who doesn't have friends, who lives in her own fantasy world with books and gardens. It's all in how you frame it. Why? Layla asked, hating the way her voice shook. Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you? For a moment, something flickered across Victoria's face, something almost human. You existed. You were proof that Hassan had loved someone before me. You were a daily reminder that I was second choice. And worse than that, you had the audacity to be kind, to be genuine, to have all the qualities I could never access. So yes, I've made your life miserable, and I'll continue to do so for as long as it takes to erase you from mattering. Layla stood frozen, finally understanding the depth of Victoria's pathology. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a systematic campaign to destroy her because her very existence was threatening to a deeply insecure woman. It won't work, Layla said, finding strength from somewhere deep inside. Rashid saw through your games at the first meeting. He'll see through this too. Perhaps, Victoria agreed. But his father won't. Khalil al-Zahiri cares about legacy, about propriety, about maintaining the family's reputation above all else. And I've just convinced him that you're a threat to all of that. As Layla finally made it to her room, she collapsed on her bed, the weight of the evening crashing down on her. The beauty of her time with Rashid felt like a dream being actively erased by Victoria's poison. But then she remembered Rashid's words. Your pain is teaching you depth. This wasn't over. Victoria might have made her move, but Layla had something her stepmother would never understand. She had the truth. She had genuine connection, and she had finally found someone who saw her real worth. The battle had just begun, and for the first time in her life, Layla was ready to fight. The morning arrived with cruel brightness, sunlight streaming through Layla's window, as if mocking the darkness of the previous night's revelations. She had barely slept, her mind replaying Victoria's venomous words and imagining the conversation that must be happening at the palace between Rashid and his father. A sharp knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Before she could respond, the door opened to reveal Victoria, perfectly composed despite the early hour, with Sabrina standing behind her wearing an expression of vindictive satisfaction. Get dressed, Victoria commanded. You've been summoned to the palace. Sheikh Khalil wants to meet the girl who's been causing such confusion. Layla's heart dropped. What did you tell him? The truth, Victoria replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That you've been manipulating his son, playing on Rashid's well-known sympathy for unfortunate cases. That you're emotionally unstable, prone to fantasy, completely unsuitable for someone of his position. I provided medical records. What medical records? Layla interrupted, ice forming in her veins. I've never had any medical issues. Details are so easily interpreted, Victoria waved dismissively. That time you stayed in your room for days after your mother's anniversary. Depression and social withdrawal. Your preference for books over social events. Antisocial tendencies. Your lack of friends. Inability to form healthy relationships. It's all about framing, dear. You're destroying someone's life based on lies, Layla said, her voice shaking with rage rather than fear. Do you understand that? You're not just hurting me. You're denying Rashid the right to make his own choices. Rashid is a child playing at rebellion, Victoria responded coldly. His father understands that sometimes we must save our children from their own foolish impulses. You should be grateful, actually. This way you'll be rejected quickly rather than building false hopes. After Victoria and Sabrina left, Layla sat on her bed, feeling the weight of impossible circumstances crushing down on her. Every instinct told her to hide, to make herself small, to accept defeat as she had accepted every other cruelty in her life. But then she remembered Rashid's words from the night before. "You've maintained your humanity in an environment designed to destroy it." And she made a decision. If she was going to be destroyed, she would at least be destroyed while standing up for truth. She dressed with care, wearing the outfit Sabrina had given her, not because she needed borrowed confidence, but because she wanted to show that even her family's small kindnesses could be transformative. She put on her mother's pendant, drawing strength from its presence against her skin. As she prepared to leave, Hassan appeared at her door. His face was haggard, as if he'd aged years overnight. "Layla, I need to tell you something before you go," he said quietly. "Something I should have told you years ago, but I was too much of a coward." "What is it?" Layla asked, though part of her wasn't sure she could handle any more revelations. "Your mother didn't just die from illness," Hassan began, his voice breaking. "She discovered something. Fraud in my business, committed by partners who threatened to destroy everything if she exposed them. The stress, the fear, the impossible position she was in. It weakened her, and when she got sick, she couldn't fight it because she was already so depleted." Layla felt the room tilting. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I let them win," Hassan said, tears streaming down his face. "I let those same partners continue in the business because I was afraid. And then I let Victoria come in and run our home because I was too guilty to be present. I've been a coward your entire life, Layla. But watching you prepare to face Sheikh Khalil's judgment with more courage than I've ever shown, it's finally making me ashamed enough to change." "What are you saying?" Hassan handed her a folder. "These are documents proving Victoria's lies about your medical history. There are no behavioral problems, no instability, no antisocial tendencies. Just a girl who survived cruelty with remarkable grace. Take them. Show Sheikh Khalil that Victoria is the one who can't be trusted." The car ride to the palace felt like traveling toward her own execution. But this time, Layla wasn't going as a victim. She was going as someone finally ready to claim her own worth. When she arrived, Khalid the steward greeted her with unusual solemnity. "Sheikh Khalil is waiting in the formal receiving room. Sheikh Rashid is with him. Miss Layla, I should warn you, Sheikh Khalil is formidable." The formal receiving room was nothing like the intimate courtyard where she dined with Rashid. This was a space designed to intimidate, with soaring ceilings, imposing artwork, and furniture arranged to emphasize hierarchy. Sheikh Khalil al-Zahiri sat in the central position, a man whose very presence seemed to command the air itself. Rashid stood near the window, his expression carefully neutral, but Layla could see tension in every line of his body. When their eyes met, she saw apology and frustration, and something that looked like fear, not for himself, but for her. "Miss Al-Mansour." Khalil's voice was deep and authoritative, carrying the weight of decades of commanding others. "Please, sit." Layla sat, keeping her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap, her expression calm despite the storm raging inside her. "I've received some very concerning information about you," Khalil began without preamble. "Information suggesting that you're an unstable young woman who has manipulated my son during a vulnerable moment." "With respect, Sheikh Khalil, that information is false," Layla responded, her voice steady. "You're calling your own stepmother a liar?" "I'm calling her statements inaccurate, and I have documentation to prove it." Layla placed Hassan's folder on the table between them. "These are my actual medical records. You'll find no history of mental instability, no behavioral disorders, no evidence of anything Victoria Al-Mansour claimed. What you will find is a record of someone who has survived a hostile home environment with resilience." Khalil opened the folder, his expression unreadable as he reviewed the documents. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of an ancient clock somewhere in the room. "Even if these records are accurate," Khalil finally said, "they don't address the fundamental issue. My son is meant to marry someone of appropriate standing, someone who brings connections, accomplishments, credentials that strengthen our family's position." "Father," Rashid started to interrupt, but Khalil raised a hand. "I'm not finished. Miss Al-Mansour, I've built this family's reputation over decades. I've made sacrifices and difficult decisions to ensure that the Al-Zahiri name means something, and I cannot allow that legacy to be compromised by a..." Romantic impulse. Then you've already lost what matters most, Layla heard herself say, surprised by her own boldness. Khalil's eyes narrowed dangerously. Excuse me? Your son told me last night about his mother, about how much he loved her, about the kind of person she was. He told me that after she died, you married someone who looked perfect on paper, but who made his childhood miserable. You chose status over substance once before, and it nearly destroyed him. You know nothing about my family's history. Khalil's voice had dropped to something dangerous. I know what it feels like to be invisible in your own home, Layla continued, her voice gaining strength. I know what it's like to have your worth determined by others' prejudices rather than your actual character. And I know that Rashid survived his childhood by learning to see beyond performances, by valuing authenticity over appearance. She stood, no longer able to remain seated while fighting for her future. Sheikh Khalil, I don't have prestigious credentials. I don't have social connections. I can't bring political advantage to your family. What I have is the ability to see your son for who he actually is, not just what he represents. And apparently that's rare enough that it matters. You presume too much, Khalil said, but there was something in his expression that wasn't entirely hostile, perhaps a glimmer of respect for her courage. I presume nothing, Layla corrected. I'm simply stating facts. You can force Rashid to marry someone appropriate. You can make him fulfill every dynastic obligation. But you'll be condemning him to the same kind of emptiness you've apparently accepted for yourself. And one day, he'll look back and realize that his father cared more about reputation than his actual happiness. That's enough. Khalil stood, his full height and bearing suddenly overwhelming. You speak to me about things you cannot possibly understand. The weight of legacy, the responsibility of power, the necessity of maintaining appearances, Layla finished. Yes, I understand that perfectly. I've spent my entire life being judged by appearances. By my stepmother who decided I wasn't worth loving. By a half-sister who needed me to be inferior to feel superior herself. By a father who was too grief-stricken to protect me. I understand appearances very well, Sheikh Khalil. What I've learned is that they're worthless compared to truth. The room fell into charged silence. Rashid looked torn between pride and terror. Khalil's expression had shifted through several emotions, landing somewhere between fury and something that might have been recognition. You have courage, Khalil finally said. Foolish, perhaps, but genuine courage nonetheless. It's not courage, Layla responded quietly. It's just that I have nothing left to lose. You can reject me, humiliate me, send me back to a family that despises me. But you can't take away the fact that for one evening, someone saw me as valuable. That's more than I've had in years, and no one can erase that truth. Khalil walked to the window where Rashid stood, and for a moment, father and son simply looked at each other. Some unspoken communication passed between them, years of conflict and misunderstanding and pain, trying to find resolution in a single glance. Rashid, Khalil said finally, when your mother was dying, she made me promise something. She said, when our son finds someone who makes him feel truly seen, don't let your pride or your politics stand in the way. I thought I understood what she meant. But I was still so angry at the world for taking her that I made terrible choices afterward. The vulnerability in that admission seemed to cost Khalil greatly. He turned back to Layla. My son believes you're extraordinary. The documents you've provided suggest your stepmother is the unstable one, not you. And your willingness to challenge me directly indicates either stupidity or integrity. And I don't believe you're stupid. Does that mean? Rashid started, hope creeping into his voice. It means I'm not going to forbid this, Khalil interrupted. But I'm also not giving my blessing yet. Miss Al-Mansour, you've survived cruelty, but can you handle scrutiny? Because if you become part of this family, every aspect of your life will be examined. Your past will be investigated. Your every action will be judged. I've been judged my entire life, Layla responded. The difference is that now I finally have something worth defending. Then prove it, Khalil challenged. Not to me. I'm already half convinced, which is more than anyone has managed in years. Prove it to yourself. Show that you can stand in this world without hiding, without making yourself small. Show that you're choosing this life rather than escaping your old one. After Khalil left the room, Layla felt her legs give way. the adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation suddenly evaporating. Rashid was at her side immediately, steadying her, his hands gentle but firm. "That was the most terrifying and impressive thing I've ever witnessed," Rashid said, and despite the intensity of the moment, there was admiration in his voice. "You challenged my father in ways no one has dared to in decades." "I think I just destroyed any chance we had," Layla whispered, reality crashing back down on her. "You did the opposite," Rashid corrected. "My father respects strength, Layla. All those appropriate women he wanted me to marry, they would have agreed with everything he said, performed deference, shown him exactly what he expected to see. You showed him truth, and underneath all his control and tradition, that's what he's been missing since my mother died. But what does it mean? What happens now?" Rashid took both her hands in his, the gesture achingly tender. "It means we fight, not against my father. He's actually on our side now, even if he can't quite admit it yet. We fight against the Victorias of the world who think cruelty is power. We fight against systems that judge worth by accidents of birth. We fight for the right to build something real in a world of performances." "I'm so tired of fighting," Layla admitted, tears finally escaping. "I know," Rashid said softly, pulling her into an embrace that felt like safety incarnate. "But this time you don't fight alone. This time you have someone who sees exactly who you are and chooses you anyway, not despite your struggles, but including them. Because your struggles made you into someone capable of this kind of courage." As they stood there, Layla felt something fundamental shifting. She had spent her entire life making herself small, accepting mistreatment, surviving rather than living. But in this moment, wrapped in the arms of someone who valued her truth, she felt herself expanding, claiming space, asserting worth, becoming visible in ways that terrified and exhilarated her simultaneously. The battle wasn't over. Victoria would undoubtedly escalate her attacks. Khalil's conditional acceptance could be revoked. The scrutiny Rashid had warned about would be intense and possibly devastating. But for the first time in her life, Layla believed she might actually be worth fighting for. And that belief, fragile as new growth but determined as ancient roots, would prove to be the foundation of everything that came next.